Hello everyone, welcome to JS Gigs and my name is Deepak. So this is going to be a very interesting tutorial. We are going to be talking about @defer keyword, and @defer keyword is something which is introduced recently in Angular, and it has pretty good use case when you're designing a B2B or a B2C application, and we will see how it really works in action. So before that, I would want to bring your attention to the public folder because I want to tell you that I have gotten some random sample data available here. So that's something which I've copied from the internet, and if I show you my Chrome browser, there you have this dummy.json.com. From here you can actually download a lot of dummy data. By default you can just go over here, prettify, and then just Control-A, Control-C, and can use this. The link of it I would show in my description box once I finish, and then you can very well go here and can take a use of it. It's pretty awesome website to start building your application from ground up, right? So I've copied that particular data, and I'll again take you back to the code. So this data I've copied from that particular website, and I'm going to be making use of this data in my app component. The reason behind writing this is that I also want to bring your attention to something which is very important, and that's something defer, trigger, and placeholder and loading keyword, right? So these all keyword are very much required in order to display, or in order to have a decent amount of data, in order to improve the performance of your application. There's going to be a little longer tutorial than the usual one. The idea behind is that I'm going to be diving deep into this defer keyword because it's something which is very new and a lot of you people would not know, and to those developers who are starting up new in Angular and those who are experienced developer would want to know and dive deeper into what defer is all about and how placeholder and how loading and other things work in Angular. This is something which is recent, and that's why I'm going to be diving a little deeper into these scenarios, and I'm also going to be referring to the documentation of Angular on and off, right? So let me first of all remove this. So what I'm going to do is, like, I'll just first of all import the data that I have copied from the internet. So what I'm going to do is, like, I'll just open the app component, and here in the app component I'm going to be importing and this fake data is going to be having, let me just show you right up. So it's fake data is going to be having a user keyword and then a user property, and the user property is what we really need to showcase. So what I'm going to do is, like, I've taken this out already. So let me define users, right? And let's just start this, and I'm going to be making use of this particular user property in my app component, right? So I'm going to be, instead of this, I'm going to be putting this right by user ID, and I'm going to be displaying this user name, and I'm going to be displaying the image tag, right? And let's just see how it really works in case of Angular, right? Or what I would do is, like, let me comment everything here. I don't think so all of it is really required at this moment. We only need to focus on the defer keyword, which is very important. So let me just comment out everything and take you back to the Chrome and see where and how this particular thing works. So there you go. Now you can see that it has loaded a lot of these images, and you can see number of these records are being created from the API response. And if I come here, probably the network tab, and from the network tab I can see this, that there is an API call being made, or there is so many calls being made to dummy JSON in order to bring the data, right? So now, there is a performance tab, ladies and gentlemen, over here, which is part of the Chrome dev tool. And what you can do essentially here is that, it basically monitors some of the metrics here, right? For example, if I were to refresh this, it's what I'm going to do is, like, it'll just refresh and it'll just record all of these things that have happened here, and we'll write it down in a neat, clean way. Onload, first paint, first content paint, and LCP. All of these things fired, or these events fired in a different time, and then the DCL essentially stands for DOM content loaded, and L, which is also the red color bar, is something which is the loading part, right? So I believe that it will be visible in your screen if you are looking at it. So let me focus on it a little bit more. So you can see that it loaded roughly about at 77 milliseconds, right? And the reason why it took so long is also because that it is loading so many of these images, right? So please keep this in mind, and we are going to be making use of this particular thing a little while later. And let me now take you to the code. So defer keyword essentially works in two ways, right? So defer essentially means that, let's say if you are deferring a particular content and the content is not available, so you can display some loading images, because as you had seen in the browser, it basically brings some of the images and loads it on the and then loads it on the browser. But then there is something that you might have noticed is that lazy loading. So lazy loading, what it essentially means is that, let's say if you are loading 100 of those images and you probably do images searches in Google, you would notice that the images, as and when you try to scroll down to the page, and that's when images try to appear on your browser. So here in this case, what happens is that if you want to mimic a similar behavior, there are a few ways in which you can achieve it. So first of which is, obviously you can make use of JavaScript function. There are some observable available. I'm not going to be diving deep into it, but I just want to bring your attention to this, and it's pretty interesting in case if you want to know more. So there is this thing called intersection observer, right? So intersection observer meaning that whenever a particular intersection observer, or there are multiple other observers available, right? So all of these observers work on the pattern when your page appears in a viewport, and that's when things start to load or some action happens, right? So these are all determined by observers in JavaScript world. However, if you want to do the same here in Angular, there are some easy ways to do it, and one of which is a defer way. That means that it will be deferred, and it will be deferred until those things are available, or those images or those data which is coming from the wire is available to be shown. So if you look at the first particular paragraph, it mentions that it basically improves the core web vital, CWB as they call it, largest contentful paint, LCP, time to first byte, which is TTFB, and primary, and then the load as well, right? So how do you use it? You just define it with the @defer, and then you try to put that component inside it, right? So how we can implement this? So let me take you to the code, and here at the code, what I'm going to do is, like, I'll just put this thing here. So let's say defer, right? And inside the defer, you can define conditions, but that's something which I'll come to later. And then what I'm going to do is, like, I'll just put this over here. All right. And let's just save this, and I'll take you back to the Chrome browser. And here in the Chrome browser, what I'm going to do is, like, I'll just show you, I'll just refresh this. You may not notice that because it's load almost instantaneously. Everything happened very quickly. So let's say if you were to do the same thing with a network constraint, what I mean by that is, like, let's say if you're doing, or if you're working on a slow network, probably 3G or a 2G, then let's see how this really works. So in case if you want to mimic that, so what you can do is, like, you can come to this, and let's say 3G, right? And then let's try to load this. So you may notice here the spinner is moving, and it took a while, but then it loaded, right? So let me just clean this all. So now you can see that it took roughly about 6.5 seconds for the largest contentful page. And or let me just reset this once again, and then do this, right? So you can see that the LCP happened in 79 milliseconds. CLS, cumulative layout shift, happened 0 times, right? And now let me see that if I do that in 3G and try to do the same, and let's see how the metrics behave. There you go. As you can see that it has taken significantly enough time in this case. Before I explain anything, I also want to bring your attention to this, that this defer keyword cannot be applied to all the components. It only works with the standalone component, as you can see over here, and they cannot be referred outside a defer block within the same file. So what I mean by that is that and then also that the component that you're trying to defer cannot be referenced outside the defer block in the same file. If you do that, then obviously it will be loaded very quickly, and then it will not really wait for defer to do. defer to do. Behavior of defer is to basically make use of any one of these intersection observer or observers which are available in JavaScript world to implement the fast loading or to improve the user performance. But then internally it is actually doing that, but externally you can make use of this defer keyword, as I've spoken to you about it already, right? So now what I'm going to do is like I'll also try to do the placeholder. But before placeholder, let's say if you want to defer that, and if you want to defer it for a particular condition, right? Let's say if you want to defer it until that particular block of until that particular element appears in your viewport, that's when you want it to, until then you want it to be deferred, right? After that it should work. So okay, so I'll talk about the viewport first, right? So let me just close this down, stop this, come here, and I'll bring you to the so you see visual viewport. There is this available viewport property. It tells us that the height of this particular window is 994 dot these many pixels, and the width is 684. And let's say if I reduce it, and if I try to read that once again, then you may notice that the width had reduced to 472 and the height rate still remains same because we are not changing the height. And let me change the height, and now let me try to see the visual viewport. Now you may notice that the height of it has also changed, right? Now again, let me bring it back to the original position, right? So now you can understand that the viewport is essentially the viewport of the browser in which user can see and interact. Let me zoom it a little bit more, right? And then close everything down. So what I'm going to do is like I'll put a condition such that until this particular image is available in a viewport, it will not really load. So in order to implement this, I'll take you back to the code once again. And in case of a defer, I'm going to be putting a particular condition which is on right. So defer on viewport, but then in this case I also need to define a placeholder. So let's say dev loading, right? Now you can see, so basically this placeholder essentially means that until this particular element is deferred, what do you want your browser to show until this is happening, right? So in that case you define it using the viewport placeholder. There's another property which is loading, and in case if you really want it to be quick and you don't really want any jank to happen, in case if an transition happens, you can actually define the keyword minimum, and in that case you can define how long you want that to happen. So in order to test it, I'm going to be doing it for 2000 milliseconds. So meaning the placeholder will be shown at least for 2 seconds, and post that a defer this particular thing would be triggered, and then it will be loaded. So now let's just see this behavior in the Chrome browser. So what I'm going to do is like I'll just come here, right? So now you can see that it says it's loading, and let me come here to this. As you can see, as and when I'm moving, it is also making a call to these APIs. So because initially all of these content was not really available in the viewport, and that's why it did not happen. So how do we test it once again? So let me refresh this bit. Please note that I'm still working in slow 3G network. I think it is going to be taking a little longer. So let me do it this way. Come here in the performance. Now you can see that because we had given a 2-second thing there, and let's say if I put a no throttling here and I try to refresh this, you can see that the LCP has become significantly low, right? And then if I go further down, it's really working very well, no problem with it, and all these API calls were triggered later on, right? So now you can see that by making use of a defer keyword and the rate placeholder, you saw the loading text appear, and post that, as and when you started to move towards the bottom of the screen, it started to make API calls in order to load those images, right? And that's how you were able to save some of the bandwidth, right? So you can do a lot of these, yeah. And let's just do this once again and look at the performance here. right? And then scroll down further and go back again. And let me stop this. I'll quickly give you an overview that how it really happened, right? Rather, let me open the thread over here. Now you can see that as and when we scrolled down to the image, or we scroll down to the particular page, these API calls were made, right? So you can see that this particular call was made as and when it appeared as I started to move. You can see this behavior here on your screen right now, right? And as and when it came to the viewport, the corresponding API calls were made, right? And that's something you can also see from the network tab over here. So this is all about the defer keyword, and this is all about the viewport. We have just spoken about one particular condition, which is our viewport, but then there are multiple other things as well. Like you can look for the idle, interaction, hover, immediate, and timer. There are many other options that you can make use of with the defer keyword, but the important one was at the rate deferred and placeholder. Now let's just talk about another keyword, which is at the rate loading, right? So, and what is the difference between at the rate loading and at the rate placeholder? So if you look at the documentation over here, it says that the loading block is an optional block that allows you to declare content that is shown while defer dependencies are loading. It replaces placeholder block once loading is triggered, right? Do you notice that until the loading was triggered, or until the defer was triggered, you would see the placeholder, but then loading would come into play as and when the defer thing is triggered. So what happens here is that whenever this particular thing, the one which is highlighted in this case, in our case it was image, and here in this case it's a large component. Whenever this being loaded in the background, what really happens is that the placeholder would be shown initially, but then the moment it triggers, the loading icon would be shown, and it has two parameters basically, which is minimum and after. Then you can see that after 100 milliseconds, so until then it will show the loading part, and then after minimum at least one second it has to show. And why this minimum and after is given is also to basically avoid flickering on the user browsers. And let's just see how it really works in action, and I'll take you to my code. So here the code. What I'm going to do is next is that I'll just define that at the rate loading, or let me put it here. And loading, I'm going to be doing this with minimum now. What I'm going to do is, like, I'm just going to be removing the placeholder altogether, and let's see. And I'm also going to be removing this because this trigger you can only define in case when you define a placeholder. It really doesn't really work with the at the rate loading. So let me just save this thing here, and again I'll take you back to the Chrome browser, and let's see what is the behavior here. Let's just refresh this. Oh, let me do some code change here. Okay, and after essentially means how long do you want this minimum loading a block to be visible after how many amount of time. So let's say 10 milliseconds. Apparently our images are being loaded pretty fast, so this is not really taking the after keyword. But then let's say if I were to display it at least for the 2 seconds, that's how I would define it. And I'll take you back to the Chrome, and here the Chrome, what I'm going to do is let me do this in the fast 4G, and then display this. You can see that it appears for at least 2 seconds, and post that API call was made to load these images, and it loaded immediately, right? So that's how it really works. In this tutorial, we have understood what at the rate defer is, what at the rate placeholder is, and what at the rate loading is. But there's another thing which is at the rate error, which means that let's say if this particular API fails, what do you really want to display in case of an error, right? So you can define this template over here. You can divide even more complex templates here, and you can probably create a query by using defer, placeholder, loading, error, and triggers, which are these 6 triggers available here, which is idle, viewport, interaction, hover, immediate, and timer. You can create any of this combination and can create your template accordingly. So that's all about control flow, or that's all about the defer keyword, ladies and gentlemen. So I am also going to be going back to the tutorial. So please understand that this one was really important, and that's why I've given a decent enough time to teach you guys, how it really works. Right, we have covered all of these, and deferred view is also something that we have covered already. Now I'm going to be doing is that in the next tutorial, I'm going to be talking about the optimizing images, and that's something which is going to be really interesting. But that's all for now for the deferred keyword, ladies and gentlemen. And if you are liking my work, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Also hit the bell icon in case if I post a new video, you would be notified. So thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen, for watching it all that while. And I'm going to be seeing you in the next tutorial when I'm going to be covering more advanced topic of Angular. So thank you once again. Bye-bye.